Welcome to a Boxscore Geeks special segment. Today's segment, why I'm a Westbrook hater. This should come as no shock to anybody that follows me regularly on Twitter, has looked at my work for the last several years at Wages of Wins and Boxscore Geeks. I am not the biggest fan of Russell Westbrook, and that's not to say that I think Russell Westbrook is a bad player. That's merely to say I think he's overrated, and today's show I'll be talking about that. As you've noticed with all of our Boxscore Geeks shows, we like getting feedback from you. So last week we asked you a little bit about Kevin Love versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Essentially, what's more likely to happen? Kevin Love ending up on Golden State or the Cleveland Cavaliers finally learning how to use their first-round pick correctly when they're not getting the best player in the history of basketball? You guys actually cited slightly more with Kevin Love ending up in Golden State. Of course, we didn't add hell freezing over as an option, so I don't know how likely you honestly think it is. This week's poll is much more simple. Is Russell Westbrook overrated? You can be the judge. No, he's actually a star, key to, a championship contending team. Or no, he's an overrated, overpaid ball hog. So on to more about Russell Westbrook. I think he's overrated. And I think it's important to talk about what that means in basketball because I get into these arguments a lot. And the first thing to take into consideration is that in the NBA, there is a salary cap, which dictates how much each team is allowed to spend in total on all their players. And that means it's actually really important to decide how to spend your money. Russell Westbrook currently ranks in the top 25 in terms of NBA salaries. He's a little below Durant, but that's only because he hasn't been in the NBA as long. And the way the NBA works is on seniority. So if you've been in the league longer, you're eligible for a higher pay. But he's one of the highest paid players. That's not to say he's alone in being mispaid. There are a lot of bad players in the top 25 that don't deserve their paycheck. But that's actually hugely important, and it's one thing that's kind of hindering the Thunder's growth. Obviously, they had to get rid of James Harden. They lucked out a little with Kevin Martin having a slight resurgence. But, essentially spending your money poorly in the NBA is it's going to harm your long-term prospects. And the Oklahoma City Thunder have done that with Russell Westbrook as well as Kendrick Perkins. But we'll leave Kendrick Perkins to another podcast. So that's the first thing. Most people always leave out pay, and you just can't. Russell Westbrook is an above-average player. He's a good player. He is not worth the salary there. You really need to be giving that to a marquee player. There may be 5 or 10 players I would be willing to give that salary to if I was an NBA GM. Feel free to bug me on Twitter in the comments if you want to hear more about which players I would pick. Westbrook isn't one of them. Another important thing to consider about Westbrook is he's not a good shooter. And I'm really sorry about this. It's just if you look at his shooting efficiency above many games, he shoots below average or close to average for what you'd want from a point guard. And that's problematic for a few reasons. The first is he takes a ton of shots. He actually takes the second most shots on the Oklahoma City Thunder. I believe Brian's going to have a chart up showing that for you. He only shoots fewer shots than Kevin Durant. And I believe last year he actually shot more shots per game than Kevin Durant. This year, because of injury and Kevin Durant's amazing January, he shot less, but he takes a ton of shots. And then if you actually look at efficiency, the one we'll use is true shooting percentage, which takes into account three-point shots and free throws. These are very important, much like Moneyball. It's really important to consider just, how you're getting points. It doesn't matter if you're getting from behind the line, from behind the stripe, or from the line. Getting points matters. Russell Westbrook's not that hot. He's actually the 6th worst player, or best player, on the Thunder at doing this. But he's taking, the second most shots. A lot of times when we bring this up, people bring up the idea of a usage curve. Basically, that if you take more shots, your efficiency is going to go down. We're not suggesting that Russell Westbrook stopped shooting a lot. What we're suggesting is if he maybe took 5 fewer shots a game and redistributed them to the 5 players above him on his team, it would probably be better for efficiency. And that's actually going to bring up the key truth about Russell Westbrook, which is he is a very talented athlete, but what he's good at is not what people think he's good at. You can hear me clicking in the background. I'm going to the Boxscore Geeks comparison engine. If you look at Russell Westbrook, where he's really, really good is at rebounding, both offensive and defensive. He's really good at steals. He's actually about average for blocks. He's good at assists, except when you take into account turnovers. He has 10.8 assists per 48 minutes to 6 turnovers per 48 minutes. That's a ton of turnovers. An average point guard gets 8.5 assists to 3.4 turnovers. They don't get as many assists, but they get far fewer turnovers than Westbrook. And the cool thing, Basketball Reference has incorporated some play-by-play data, so hopefully Brian gets this in front of you as well. If you go look at the play-by-play data and look at where Russell Westbrook's turnovers are coming from, they're coming from passing. He is a bad passer. So really, we have a player that's very good at getting the ball via steals and rebounds, and we see that in why he's above average. He's a little above average at shooting, and he shoots a ton, but he's actually quite bad at distributing the ball. And when we look at his shooting efficiency, it's not impressive when you consider the caliber of team he's on. So really, that's why I think he's overrated. He's taking more shots than he should. He's getting paid more than he should. He's basically overusing resources that are really valuable to his team, and that hinders both their long-term performance, if they'll be able to keep winning in the future, as well as, if they're able to win games regularly. That brings up kind of another important point, which is Russell Westbrook does have good games. Hopefully Brian's getting a graphic up in front of you showing kind of Russell Westbrook's game-by-game log. This is kind of a cool internal tool we have that shows good games and bad games for players. Now, what we'll notice is green is good, red is bad. Nothing surprising there. Russell Westbrook has some good games and a few spikes, but basically he's above average and has a few really, really good games, and these stick out in people's minds. If you go look at Kevin Durant on the same team, Kevin Durant has just tons and tons and tons of really, really good games. And this is the distinction between Russell Westbrook being a star and an above average player. In any kind of statistics and probability, what you're going to notice is some days a player is just going to perform really, really well. You're going to have a really good game. You even have this. Some days are really, really good at work for you. You're playing Candy Crush. You just have a really, really good level. I've never actually played Candy Crush, so to those of you listening, you probably know better than what I'm talking about. But to be a star, you have to get these pretty regularly. Players like Durant and LeBron James do. Westbrook does not. The problem is people actually just remember his really, really good games a lot. A case in point, he had an amazing game in the playoffs. He scored 40 points. When we factor in his free throws and where he went 14 for 14, and three-point shooting, I believe he went 2 for 5. He scored 40 points, very efficient shooting, really, really good at steals. He actually kept his turnovers down relative to what he's doing. So he had an amazing game. Everybody remembers this. He evened up the series. He's the reason the Oklahoma City Thunder are even with the Spurs. But the dark truth is you only need to look back at Russell Westbrook's past 4 games in the playoffs and see that he has really not performed that well, across the playoffs. His last 4 games, he had a horrendous one where I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, I think he went 7 for 24. He's had regular games where he's getting 4 or 5 turnovers and fewer than 10 assists. He has not been a great player in the playoffs, but he's had a few key games.
Yeah, and he also started that game 3 for 15, so it really dug them a big hole.
Yikes, and they didn't win the game either. So not only did he dig them a big hole, they didn't get out of it. And, to that point, people will say, well, this was a must-win game, right? They evened up the series 2-2. He performed when he had to. Well, yeah, they were in a 2-0 hole, though, in large part because he, and yes, actually Durant as well, because good players can have bad games, did not perform that hot. And this is more the norm for Westbrook. We're not expecting to see him play great games. We're expecting to see above-average games. But what this is called in psychology is the availability heuristic. The easier it is to remember something, the more likely we think it is. So we're going to remember all of Russell Westbrook's really good games, and we're going to forget his bad games. And there's a good reason for this that I looked into a few years ago when I was on my Westbrook versus Lawson kick. And basically, if you break down when Westbrook has bad games, so this was in 2012, so Harden was still a member of the Thunder. You broke that down. Basically what we saw is it didn't matter how bad Westbrook performed, unless it was horrendous, unless he was costing his team 10 to 15 points. And even then, the Thunder's win-loss record in cases where Westbrook performed horribly was 2-2. But in games where Westbrook was below average, his team went 17-14. Basically, they still had a winning record when he played bad. And the reason's pretty simple. He has really, really good teammates. So we're less likely to remember when Westbrook has a bad game and point the finger at him because he has good teammates and his team can still win the game even when he plays bad. When he plays amazing in, I'll put this in quotes, must-win situations, everybody remembers it because, oh, that's an amazing game. And this is one of those things I've seen with Westbrook, players like Aldridge and Melo. They have this great game, and apparently it gives people amnesia for about 10 to 15 other games in the season. And, it just kind of drives me nuts. And one of the reasons is, this is kind of just giving credit to the wrong person and kind of on a bigger scale. It gives support to ideas that we rally against regularly. The yay points, and I'm actually, surprisingly enough, wearing my yay point shirt, is a common thing. And by the way, we'll give a shout out at the end. I'm going to preemptively give a shout out, Brian, to Ethan Sherwood-Strauss. He actually is the one who came up with the yay points name. He's amazing. So
I'll buy those yay point t-shirts by the box full if you sell them, Dre.
We hear that there is actually a pretty high markup, but we'll work on that. So anyway, the Ethan Sherwood-Strauss named the yay points, which is basically just this common problem in the NBA to overvalue points above everything else. It's what determines who gets drafted, what determines who gets paid, Westbrook included. And, it kind of hinders the advanced stats movement because they're focusing on the wrong stats. Westbrook is the epitome of this because the stuff he's good at is not scoring, but what everybody loves is that he gets over 20 points per game. And that kind of just drives me bananas, frankly. Next, I keep hearing how good the Thunder are at drafting. And they're above average. I'll give them that. The problem with the NBA is the NBA grades on a curve. And to be honest, the curve isn't that strong. You can be an above average team in regards to drafting and player evaluation. And I still may not think you're that good at it. But you're just above average because there are some really horrible teams. Just look at the Knicks for the Knicks and the Clippers for the last decade before, Chris Paul and Jason Kidd hopped ship were horrendous. So, the Thunder are above average, but they're not that hot. If you look at their drafting model, really their success comes from the fact that they lucked into Kevin Durant. That's 80, 90%. We talk about the Pareto principle a lot. He is the key workhorse driving that team, and that was mostly luck. But that gives people to say, oh, they're really good at drafting, and one of the reasons is Westbrook scores a lot of points, and they picked Westbrook with a top 5 pick. So that always irks me a little too. And then, of course, the Thunder are the team that is brought up as why tanking works. And, Westbrook's one of the examples. And again, to the point, they lucked into Durant and kept tanking. They didn't really need to. They could have built a successful team around Durant without needing to do that. But people will bring them up as a model. And, when you spend a lot of your time researching and commenting on models and hoping to advance theories, and you have these people that are held up as, icons of the things that you're rallying against, it makes it very hard. And it's one of the reasons why I rally against Russell Westbrook so much. But again, to my point, I think he's overrated. The wins produced number says he's a very good player. He was a very good player this year. He's just not a star player. He's just not worth $14 million a year. He's just not worth 18 shots a game. That's all I'm really saying. And that's why I'm not a Russell Westbrook fan. I'm going to love to see what you say. I'm not going to lie. If you want to troll me, I will just feel pain if that survey comes up and says Russell Westbrook is not overrated.
Well, then, Dre, let me increase the trolling a little bit then. If you could answer this question, what should he be paid, and who's a player that produces similar to him, if I can put you on the spot a little bit?
You are putting us. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go to Boxscore Geeks and go to players and then sort by point guards. I'm letting you know on the off chance. This is me because you were telling me that it's hard for you to ask questions and produce.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm doing that. So Russell Westbrook, based on the minutes he played, this is going to be a funny one. I'm going to get in trouble. This lines up too perfectly not to use. He played more minutes per game, but because he was injured, he played almost the identical minutes to this other player, which was Patrick Mills of the San Antonio Spurs. So I'm just going to pull this up really quick too. I know this is always the most fast. This has to be the most fun for the listeners. If we were nice, we'd edit this out. But Patrick Mills, if we examine him, I just want to actually see if he assists. He doesn't actually. He's kind of interesting in that he is what people think Westbrook is. He doesn't really assist that much. He gets about 4.7 assists per game, but he keeps his turnovers low. So he keeps his assist to turnover ratio in line with what we want from a point guard, but he's actually really efficient at scoring. So if we look at Patrick Mills, his true shooting percentage is 58.8%. And per 48 minutes, he'd get about 26 points. Now, Westbrook would get about 34 points per 48 minutes, but he's just not efficient. So I would actually say, what's he worth paying? We talked about this with Arturo on the last show. Except unless it's Chris Paul or the reincarnation of Magic Johnson, I can't ever see paying a point guard more than 10 million a year. And if I wanted to take that point guard, I would take Patrick Mills, and I would believe I could get him for less than 10 million a year.
That's a number I was going to throw out there too. Good job.
Yeah, if you're paying, my opinion is if you're paying more than 10 million a year for your point guard, unless it's a star, I mean, they paid Chris Paul a max contract extension. That was a slam dunk. That is the one case I will ever applaud that move. In this case, in Russell Westbrook's case, we saw what happened. They had to get rid of James Harden. Because of loving Westbrook and Ibaka, they're stifling themselves from getting bigs, even though they're actually drafting bigs well. That's one of the things about their draft model that, to me bugs me is they do draft some good players and these players don't get played. So it's hard for me to buy that they honestly have a good model in place. The players they think are driving their success aren't the players that are, except for Durant. Everybody accepts Durant's name.
Awesome. So what else have we got for the show today, Dre? Anything else? Shout outs?
Okay.
Or are you?
So yeah, we're gonna keep this week short. This is actually we'll let you guys in on behind the scenes footage. We're actually hoping to do more segments with maybe asking myself, Arturo, or Patrick to kind of stay condensed on one topic and run it down and maybe incorporate more of these in the show. If you enjoy them, let us know in the comments or on Twitter because it makes our lives easier to produce and do that than it's the pizza problem trying to get 4 Skype people on a call together across several time zones with spotty internet connection. I believe Arturo may not even be able to talk to you tonight, Brian. I think he said, he may get rained out. So some of these are fun.
He said his power is out.
Yeah, and that's got to be because of acclimate weather. So if you guys have specific topics you'd like us to talk about, just listen to myself, Patrick, or Arturo ramble for 10, 15 minutes, let us know. And with that, though, this is something we typically do on the full show and we'll always keep in. We always do shout-outs. So the first one I want to give a shout-out is to Snotty Drippin. It's on Twitter. I believe he's going by Tweetwood Mac at the moment. In the middle of the week last week, he said, you got to be following this guy, Nerd Numbers. And I shot up by 70 followers in about a half an hour. I was right next to 3,000 followers, and I was really afraid I was going to cross that 3,000 threshold, then tick off a new follower and fall below it. It's always painful to see that happen. So I leapt over the 3,000 barrier thanks to Snotty Drippin, not looking back. Thanks, everybody who's following me, and thanks so much for the friend follow from Snotty Drippin. That was really nice. He's one of those people that kind of agrees with me on Westbrook usually, but we still argue because it's really hard to find 2 basketball analytics people on the web that agree on everything. But fantastic person to follow on Twitter. Thank you so much for the followers. One you threw out actually, Brian, was Ethan Sherwood Strauss. As I said, the namer of the Yay Points theory. And he's been promoted to full-time at ESPN, which, again, I called signing Chris Paul a slam dunk. True Hoop, ESPN, slam dunk. Ethan Sherwood Strauss is one of the sharpest, most intelligent basketball writers on the web. He's a joy to follow on Twitter. I have nothing but good stuff to say about him. So congrats, Ethan. If you're listening to this podcast and not following Ethan, I don't know what's the matter with you. You're probably here because of Ethan, more likely than the other way around, but amazing guy. And the last person, I'm not going to even attempt to say his last name. I've been talking with him for the last couple of years. Regular commenter on the Wages of Wins is, I believe I'm saying this right. I looked this up before the show, so let me know if I'm wrong. It's Tebow, and I'm not going to say the last name because I don't want to muck it up. He just finished his master's thesis, sent along to me. I'm in the process of reading it. Congratulations. It's on, sports economics and basketball. So that is amazing. Congratulations to the master's thesis. Thanks for sending it along. Thanks for all your good comments, and we wish you nothing but the best in the future, Tebow. So that's all I got, Brian. If you want to shout anything out, I'll let you do that. Otherwise, I'll let us out.
I do have one shout out, and let me bring this up on the screen really briefly here on Zach Lowe's Twitter, but this is a quote from Chris Bosh, actually, when he was asked, why did he move his game from the post out to the perimeter? And, well, similar to the infamous Antoine Walker quote from years past, except the opposite and actually good. Well, he found out he could get more points for shooting threes than shooting twos. And I really love that. And, Dre, here's the reason why I really love that. even though this is one of the simplest, easiest things you can possibly say, it's very profound to analytics, and that's awesome.
Yeah,
Shout out to
I
him.
mean, it's funny. True shooting percentage hasn't caught on as much as I would like, and it's to me it amazes me the Moneyball movement that it was on base percentage because walks matter was the huge breakthrough. In basketball, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter how you get those points. It just matters that you turn as few possessions into as many points as possible. And as Chris Bosh notices, that 3-point line is a pretty good cheat.
Absolutely. So I got nothing more. Unless you want to say something more, Dre, let's end the show. Are you good?
I'm good. Please, please, please don't say that Westbrook isn't overrated. I'm asking you fans, please. I know it's kind of mean to bias our own poll, but I'll leave you on that. Vote the poll, Westbrook overrated.
It took some balls to come out after his big game, but that's why, we're the Boxscore Geeks. Always have to be angsty about it. Great job today, Dre. We'll see you next time.